Hello, sinners. I just wanted to drop in and tell you that My Horror Confessional is now part of the Ghoulish Podcast Network. In addition to producing podcasts, Ghoulish is also a publisher. Ghoulish Books has published dozens of horror books that have gone on to receive award recognition and even film adaptation treatments. Browse their spooky offerings over at ghoulish.rip and use discount code CONFESSIONAL for 10% off your order. And remember, ghouls, live spooky, die spooky. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel. Wow. A professional setup we got here. All right, let me set that over again. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to My Horror Confessional, where every week I'll have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they are properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today, we have Xxena Rush. Xena is the head of production, social media, and marketing for her production company, Original Cinematic, an independent film production company dedicated to films that have a focus on inclusive sets, stories, and people. As a bisexual person, her mission of LGBTQIA plus representation in all her productions is deeply personal and non-negotiable. She has multiple producer credits, including One for the Road, the upcoming Immersion, and the award-winning Group. She's also executive producer for the feature-length documentary Pack is Here, about trans roller derby athletes, as well as serving as executive producer on the upcoming short horror film The Cottage, directed by Halston Mann. Currently, she's working on post-production on the film Immersion, as well as handling the festival circuit, particularly media and marketing for a group. She has been recognized for Vancouver's She has been recognized by Vancouver's Bridge Fest International Film Festival as Best Producer for Group. Group itself, the first official Xena and Rush production, has won 9 awards for Best Picture thus far and has been nominated for several additional Best Film, Best Picture, or Best Genre Film nominations. This past week, Group had both its European and Asian premieres in Paris, France, and Chennai, India, respectively. She has been selected as a nominee for her producing for Group from several other festivals and was recently interviewed by New York City's Macro Project Film Festival, which is anticipated to be published soon. She is based out of the Philadelphia area where she lives with her 3 amazing daughters, Adriana, Mary, and Victoria, her husband Bill, and her 2 giant German shepherds, Beth and Ted. Great names. She,
Right.
she loves horror films and is a huge fan of the rape revenge subgenre. And now she has a new most hated film in that subgenre. I wonder what movie that is. Zena, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, that's a great bio. Congratulations on all your awards for Rush.
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
saying my Rush
For
for a
group.
group. Yeah, for a group.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really cleaning up at the film festivals.
yeah. So I had the opportunity to watch the movie. It's maybe a month ago now at this
Hmm.
point. Um, at in Was it Amarillo?
Abilene,
Abilene.
Abilene. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't grow up in Texas, so I don't.
I can't
And
believe you made a 4-hour drive for that. I didn't realize it was so far.
yeah, no, I mean, to meet Pod Mortem for the first time and to meet you guys and watch the movie, like I probably would have driven a lot farther. So
Well,
thank you
that's
so
an
much
honor.
for giving us the opportunity to watch the movie. We really enjoyed ourselves.
Awesome. I'm really glad. I know there was some sound issues in the beginning where everything was exceptionally loud.
Listen, I can't imagine how Bill was feeling, like knowing that it doesn't sound like that and having to
Mhm.
just like grin and bear it. I probably would have flipped the table, but he
Yeah,
handled it very
he
well.
was trying to be very calm and like it'll be okay. And halfway through, I'm like, you're gonna have a meltdown. I would have a meltdown. Why don't
Yeah,
we just ask
anybody
them to
would.
fix it? Yeah, because he did such a great job with that movie, and the sound design is so good that we wanted it to be heard for what it was, how it was supposed to be heard, not You couldn't hear the dialogue and the sound effects were too loud. So once we got it fixed, like, everything was fine.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, William Rush is Xena's husband, and also he directed the movie Group, and he's actually going to be on the show next week. So, and we'll get to talk to him a little bit more about that. So let's focus on you here. So, um, you have you have a couple of producer credits already for now, but I understand the way I understand it, Original Cinematic is a fairly new company. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Right.
about a year.
Okay, great. So, what were you in film before and then started original cinematic, or is this kind of your first foray into film?
This is a first. So, Bill is an attorney, and I am the paralegal for the firm. And then we started getting into movies, and from there we formed the production company to kind of have one big umbrella for the movies to come out of. And that's how we started Original Cinematic. And I think it was maybe the early last year we started, or maybe late the year before. I don't remember exactly.
Okay, nice. And um, is that something that you kind of go into naturally? Like, have you always been like into film?
Into films, yes. Making them is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
We had done a Stephen King short early last year, which was kind of, I was just talking to Bill this morning about it. It was like film school for him. And, I learned how to do all the background, the production stuff from that. So then, doing group was much, I don't want to say easier, but it was easier because we already knew kind of what to do and what was expected. And it made it a lot easier to do group because we had done One for the Road earlier in the year. But then One for the Road was the first thing that we'd ever done. But as far as watching films and loving films, always.
So, One for the Road is was that the Stephen King one?
Hmm.
Is that one of those Dollar Baby ones?
Hmm. Yeah,
Oh,
Bill
okay.
got in just under the wire for that. They just stopped that.
Yeah, I heard, that's what I was going to ask you.
Hmm.
So what do you know what the process was for like getting with the going through like the Dollar Baby program? Is there a program or how does that work?
The program, I mean, there isn't one anymore, but
Right.
so Bill had to outline his idea for which short story he wanted to adapt. And then they approved it and sent over a contract with Stephen King's signature on it. Um,
Wow, that's
yeah, it's
cool.
awesome, right? And then Bill signed it, I notarized it, and then we sent it back, and we had to make the movie in a year. So from the moment that Bill got the rights to it, he had a year to write the film, cast it, film it, edit it, and then get it to Stephen King so Stephen King could watch it within that year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a quick process.
Especially since then you're kind of at the maybe if you're running late or whatever, you're up to the wire with having him watch it.
Mhm.
But so within that year, if he watches it and likes it, then you're able to release it. Is that how it works? Or
Well, we're not supposed to release it anywhere. We can't make money off of it, so it can't be distributed anywhere.
okay,
Um, no, I don't know if Stephen King liked it, if he would have let it be shown places or let us make any money off of it. I'm not sure how that end of the process works.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it was cool. I mean, doing a miniature adaptation of the sequel to Salem's Lot, which is amazing. It was
Yeah,
kind of cool to do that.
that's great. So, as a executive producer, I've always wanted to know. wh- I say I'm kind of like you, where I've all grown up watching movies and I talk about movies all, but I don't know what an executive producer does. So, is it kind of like a project manager where it's literally everything, everything falls into bucket, that sort
Pretty
of thing?
much,
Okay,
yeah. The locations for group, there were two filming locations. Well, it was all filmed in one room, but like the projection scenes were filmed in another room in a different house. So that I took care of finding the transportation for the cast and finding housing for the cast and locations for filming and setting up all the little things like catering, and I did all the wardrobe. Um, I kind of thank God, had help. We had a couple associate producers on group, which helped me because there was a lot of travel that week. It was like we picked everyone up on one day and then we filmed for three and then taking everyone back on the fourth day for us to start another one on the fifth day, like a whole different film.
Oh, wow.
So we filmed group in 3 days, but it was a lot of traveling to pick everybody up from their respective houses and bringing them to set and then making sure they had what they needed. And some people didn't. So then I had to run and grab other stuff for people. It was a lot of keeping everything in place so that everything ran smoothly.
Yeah, like basically being responsible for the movie being able to be made.
Yeah. Yes.
That's great. So would you mind giving our listeners like a background or a summary of what group is about?
It is a group of people in um a I don't want to say Narcotics Anonymous, um, in a addiction type setting, where they're all expressing their stories and what they're saying is not exactly what the truth is of their situation. I'm
Yeah.
trying to say it without giving anything away. It's very
Yeah,
hard.
it's you don't want to give it away because it's really good and the acting is great and
Yeah, they did really, 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 really well.
one actor in particular kind of like stole the show for me and after the screening Bill was nice enough to have a Q&A, which was great, and we got to ask him questions and all that. So that was a lot of fun. But so you're currently working on some other productions, is that correct?
Yeah, we're in post-production. Actually, the one we did right after group, there was like a day in between ending group and beginning filming on another one. That's called Immersion. That's being edited right now. I think it's almost done. And then we're in pre-production for a movie called Fetish. Um, I'm not sure when we're filming that. I think it might be April, but I'm not sure.
Okay. You guys are just going hard, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot of preparation means that we can get a lot of things done in a short span of time. But him and I work really well together. It's like we whatever needs to be done, one of us just does it. It's just we don't miss things because we work really well together.
Yeah. Do you find yourselves working exclusively in the horror genre, or are you guys branching out to multiple different genres?
So far it's been only horror, but Bill did start a script that I personally really love. It's called Red, White, and Green. And it's like a cop comedy. And then we're Chris and Joe from Group are they did a play called Manny and Diego that Bill's working with them to adapt into a screenplay, which is not a horror. It's
Okay.
more of like a love story.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. So, let's go ahead and get started in talking about you and your background. So, uh, did you grow up? And it's fine if you didn't. Everybody has different paths to where they're at. But did you grow up enjoying horror movies? Did your family watch them or that sort of thing?
My older sister was obsessed with horror movies. She introduced me to Freddy Krueger. I saw the third one, I think, that was the first horror movie I ever saw was the
Dream
one
Warriors.
where he puts her head in a TV. I
Yeah.
think that's the one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she was a huge fan of Pinhead. So she got me hooked on that. And then it was a lot of like the ones that now are kind of like B-rated horror movies, but
Yeah.
it was like fun to watch them back then. And then as I got a little older, I got a little more scared of watching horror movies. And it wasn't until I mean, it took me almost a year to watch the entire first Conjuring because I would watch it like 5 minutes at a time, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore. But then, the shutdown happened with the pandemic, and Bill and I started really watching a whole bunch of movies, and horror just kind of became like my favorite genre. It's like he would ask me what I want to watch. It's like, well, what horror movies haven't we seen yet? And it kind of became that. So that's like, I mean, horror's my favorite now.
Yeah.
As
That's
a kid, I
cool.
was a big baby about it.
So in your bio, you said that you were a big fan of the rape revenge subgenre.
Mhm.
Um, so are there any standouts to you that you remember that you enjoyed?
Um, well, we watched one about a year ago and we just rewatched it last night, called Revenge.
Oh yeah, that's a
Um,
good one. Yeah, that came up
yeah,
early, like 2017 or something.
yeah, it's recent.
Yeah.
That one is very good. I love that one. And then there's another one called Elle. I believe it's
Hmm.
French.
Okay. Is it
Um,
ELLE?
yeah,
Okay.
and it is also very good. It doesn't follow the traditional rape revenge like timeline or storyline. It's I don't even know how to describe it. It's unlike any other rape revenge movie I've ever seen. It's just very it blew me away. It was very, very good. For a
Mhm.
rape revenge movie, it's incredible.
Yeah. And so for you, what do you think it is about the rape revenge subgenre that you enjoy? And enjoy is kind of a weird word to say, right? Because
Yeah.
it's touchy
Yeah.
subject matter, but so what is it about it that maybe brings you back to the genre?
I like the I mean, in the beginning it's not very empowering for women, but the revenge part of it is such female empowerment. Like they're taking control of what was taken from them. And I
Yeah,
really love that. It's very feminist. I love that.
right. Another one that while you were saying that just came to mind, that one that I had seen recently is A Promising Young Woman.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, that one was really good as well.
That is very good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I that the color in that was beautiful.
yeah, and without getting into spoilers, the way it ends, just the way it goes, is kind of different than what we typically see in the
Hmm.
subgenre, which for some people they might not like or whatever the case may be. But I like that they tried something different.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so let's get started, talk about the movie. But first, before we do that, could you let everybody know how they could follow you, how they could support your work, maybe how they could see the movies, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So we're not doing many screenings of the movie currently because we're doing the film festival circuit, so we have to kind of keep it a little closed. But as far as finding us on Instagram, it's at original cinematic. Um, and then for me, it's at X_Rush, 2617, I believe. Um, so you can find us on Instagram. We're on Twitter, but we aren't really active on Twitter. It's mostly just Instagram.
Yeah, same. I've kind of like fallen off of Twitter
Yeah.
for
It's
reasons.
weird to call it X. I won't.
Oh, never. I will never. I will never. I'll die in my grave before I do that. Okay. Well, and then I will link your socials in the show notes as well. So, all right, let's get started talking about the movie. I just want to do a huge trigger warning here for the movie. Obviously, here we're here to talk. Xena's here to confess her horror sin of never having watched "I Spit on Your Grave" from 1978. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, everybody knows it's a rape revenge film. So along with that, it's really fraught with a lot of but subject matter that is could be triggering for people. Please, um, the first half of the film really is where the worst happens, and then afterwards, it's kind of like the revenge, like Xena was saying. So, if you think that's something that you can listen to, please go ahead. If not, maybe skip this one and come back next week. We'd love to have you next week. But with that being said, I am not an expert when it comes to sexual assault or talking about it, anything like that. I'm going to try to be as uh, as sensitive to the subject matter as I possibly can. I may make mistakes. Please keep in mind that I'm not doing it with any ill intent. So, and then of course Xena as well. She isn't as well. So so just be nice to us. It's a bad. It's difficult to talk about, right?
Yes, it is a very sensitive subject.
Yeah. All right. So, I Spit on Your Grave from 1978. It was originally released in 1978 under the title Day of the Woman, and was poorly received at the box office. But in 1980, a distributor named Jerry Gross renamed it I Spit on Your Grave. This time it received more publicity and became a key target of Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel's campaign against films featuring women in danger. And that, of course, skyrocketed it up the charts. It found a new life with VHS rentals in America and even in the UK, making it one of the first video nasties ever. And if people aren't aware of video nasties, it was in the 80s in UK, they literally made it illegal to own some of these movies, and I Spit on Your Grave being one of them. So you could be fined and even imprisoned for owning the movie, which is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, so it thanks to Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, it found a new life, which I always love to hear because this is maybe the third or fourth film that I've watched that was on the Video Nasty films
Hmm.
or Video Nasty list or that Roger Ebert really hated. So it's like thanks for promoting these films for free,
I
Roger.
know. Bill read me his review, Ebert's review of it, and I was a, a little shocked at how much he hated it. I mean, I hate it as well, but he was really not a fan of this movie.
Yeah. And I think a little of it like reeks of like I don't know, like maybe he doesn't believe like he thinks that he's a voice for women or
Hmm.
something like that. And because I there's actually a documentary on this called Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave, which was directed by um the director. So the director of this movie is Meir Zarchi or Zarki, not sure, but Meir Zarchi, and his son was in I Spit on Your Grave. He was the little kid in the movie. He was one of the two
The
kids that
son.
yeah, so the son of the director Meir Zarchi was
Hmm.
in the movie. Johnny, the character who owns a gas station, and he
Yeah,
has a wife.
and the kids.
Yeah, the kids. Those are both
Uh,
the director's kids.
I can't believe he put his kid in this movie.
And that little kid went on to make a documentary about his name was Terry Zarchi, and he made a documentary called Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave. And in that documentary, they have multiple women in there talking about they believe, it being a feminist movie, and in fact, one survivor of SA, or two survivors of SA saying that it helped the movie and this genre helped them after their attack or whatever.
Hmm.
So um anyway, so it was written and directed by Meir Zarchi, who went really only did one other movie called Don't Mess with My Sister, which came out in
I saw
1985.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out what that movie was about when I was reading it.
and it didn't have very high ratings, which I don't normally let stop me, but at the same time,
If the only other
I
thing
couldn't
he's ever
figure out
done
what.
is a rape revenge movie, and then he's done one other, those are the only two things he's done. I don't know that I really need to see his other movie.
But which is funny though, that which is it was true up until 2019 when he actually did the sequel to I Spit on Your Grave,
The
which is called
remake.
yeah, no, there were remakes. There was a remake
Hmm.
in 2010 and 2015 and then like 2017 or whatever. But there was a direct sequel starring the starring Camille Keaton, who's in this film, and
Oh,
it's
I didn't know
called
that.
I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu, and it's a continuing story 40 years later of Jenny or Jennifer in this movie, um, and the family of the men that she killed trying to come back and kill her. And she's got a daughter at the time, that sort of thing. So it didn't do very well. It has
I
terrible reviews, right?
I can guess a couple of reasons why.
Yeah, but I just thought it was fascinating to come back 41 years later and make movies. So your three movies are like I Spit on Your Grave and like the sequels I Spit on Your Grave, right? So it was just kind of
Yes.
fun. But it is also starring Camille Keaton. She did so she was popular in Italy in the 70s, early 70s, in the in the giallo genre, and she did
Hmm.
one of my favorite giallos, which is "What Have You Done to Solange" from 1972. And then, of
I don't
course,
think I've heard of that one.
yeah. So if you're familiar with giallo, they have like really weird movie titles,
Hmm.
and so that's just one of them. What Have You Done to Solange? And then she also, 41 years later, reprised her role of Jennifer Hills in I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu. And then the other four actors on here, there was Aaron Tabor as Johnny, Richard Pace as Matthew, Anthony Nichols as Stanley, and Gunter Kleeman as Andy. They really did nothing else. They didn't really appear in any other films. So this was kind of like their one and done. In fact, Aaron Tabor, who plays Johnny, I was watch in the interview when in the interview for Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave, the documentary, he said that after experiencing this character and seeing it, he didn't want to be associated with it, and it kind of made him not want to be an actor anymore.
I
Uh,
understand that. I did read on I think it was IMDb that all four of those men, or yeah, they all insisted on um being nude because they wanted to make the woman feel more comfortable on set, which I do genuinely love, but I still understand why they wouldn't want to ever do another movie again.
right, yeah. At one point, there's a scene in which, how do I say this? When she's on the rock,
Hmm.
right? Where she is assaulted and then she kind of rolls off the rock. And when she did it, the director wanted her to do it one way, so she wanted to shoot it again. And she was so pissed that she like got up and like went to her trailer and just like smashed shit. And then she came back and she's like, "You show me exactly how you want it done, and then if we can do it in one take, I'll do it again." And so he stripped down and was like, "Okay, this was." And he was about to take off his underwear, and she was like, "You can keep those on." so, so he kept those on, but he got naked and showed her exactly how she wanted to do it. And she's like, or how he wanted her to do it. And she said, "Okay, that's fine." And they did it, and they did it in one take. And so, like, to your point of the guys also wanting, or wanted to be naked in the film, I like that, like solidarity with the actress,
Hmm.
because she does spend a large majority of the time naked, right?
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to just get it out there. So, I Spit on Your Grave does have that iconic poster of the backside of the woman, and like her shirt is naked, and like, or her shirt is ripped, and you can see her back and it's scratched and all this sort of stuff. Um, are you aware of who that is? Because it's kind
I
of
just found out it's Demi Moore.
yeah, that's so
That's so
wild.
awesome. I know. Bill told me that, and I was like, no, it's not. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, apparently she was a model in the early 80s. I think she might have even been a nude model in the early 80s, and she worked with one of the producers of this film. And when they got the rights to change the name of the movie, because the Day of the Woman had a different poster completely. When they changed the name of the movie, um, they also did a poster as well. That's what was in their rights when they signed up to distribute it. And he asked her if she wanted to do it, and she said yeah. So she's actually written in her biography about it that it was her. And then in the interview, in the documentary Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave, one of her friends from that time, uh, who was like a roommate of hers, talks about flipping through her, what's it called? Portfolio? Is that
Yeah,
your
yeah.
work, your
Hmm.
portfolio? And that one of the boxes for this movie came out. And she's like, "Why do you have that?" She's like, "Oh, because that's me on the cover." And then
That's
later,
so insane.
one of the producers for I think a company that was trying to distribute it like in the late 2000s, um, they were working on another film with Ashton Kutcher. And at the time, Ashton Kutcher was married to Demi Moore.
Hmm.
And so in the process of working with him, they asked, like, "Hey, I know this is very awkward, and if she doesn't feel like talking about it, it's completely fine, but I have to ask, could she verify whether or not she was or wasn't, that the model or whatever? And would she be willing to talk about it?" So she wrote back, or her people wrote back, and she said, "To me, verifies that she was in fact the model for it, but she doesn't really want to speak about it." So that was that, which is completely understandable. But yeah, so
Well,
now we
yeah,
have like irrefutable proof that that is Demi Moore on the poster, which is I think just wild.
it is. It's wild because she's such a well-known and amazing actress, and then she's on the cover of that movie.
Yeah.
That movie of all movies.
And so, do you know kind of the origin of this movie?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So the director, so writer and director, Meir
Hmm.
Zarchi, has said that he was inspired to make the film after helping a young woman who had been sexually assaulted. He said that he, a friend, and his daughter were driving by a park when they saw a young woman crawling, like she was bloodied and naked, out of the bushes. They picked her up and they took his daughter back home, and then they took her. They were like, should we take her to the hospital or the police? They ended up taking her to the police, and the police at that time were really like, I mean, even to this day, I'm sure they're very
Yeah.
not good at dealing with rape. They was
Hmm.
trying to ask her questions like, what do they look like? And then at one point, Meyer, the director, just stopped the police officer and was like, she needs to go to the hospital now. And so they ended up going to the hospital, taking her to the hospital. But after that, like the girl's father reached out to Meyer and like sent him a letter of thank you and for saving my daughter and all that sort of stuff. And then always stayed with him and he wanted to write something about it. So that's what the genesis of the movie came from.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And in fact, like, so the director doesn't see the movie, has said that he doesn't see the movie as a horror film. In fact, the movie was, he felt like it would be a kind of a feminist movie. I can't say whether it is or isn't. I can just have
I
my
personally
viewpoint
do
on
not think this movie is a feminist movie. It is, um, I would say very strongly not
it.
a
Okay.
feminist movie. This one in particular.
Yeah. So but he didn't make it as a horror film, made it more as a drama, a revenge. He said it was more of a revenge film. But when the movie got changed to I Spit on Your Grave, it found its market with horror people. I don't know. How do you feel about whether it's horror? There's definitely horrific elements to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I would say it's more of a thriller. I don't know. I don't see it as a horror movie. I mean, I know it's like a iconic quote unquote horror movie, but I don't think it is.
yeah, I agree with you. Like I feel sometimes some films find their audience in the genre that they didn't start with.
Hmm.
For example, I did a movie a couple weeks ago called Safe from 1995, starring Julianne Moore, and it's really just a psychological look at a woman who's unraveling.
Hmm.
And what happens in it is and there's no blood, there's no violence. It's just all psychological. And it's like on that line of horror or not, but it
Hmm.
found its audience with horror, right? So
Yeah, and I think there are some movies I think that are a little it's hard to pinpoint or to put them in one
right.
genre. They kind
Yeah.
of cross over from genre to genre.
Yeah. So okay, so getting started talking about the movie, it starts right away. And like we get this shot of like New York high-rise apartments in the 70s. I always love to see that like that setting.
Hmm.
It's
Especially because
funny.
it looks so different now. Like New York City does not look like that now. It's cool to see it from the 70s and 80s.
So I've never been to New York, so I don't know. Yeah.
We're only about 2 hours from New York,
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
well, yeah,
Okay.
we're it's not a long drive for us.
Gotcha. So, but yeah, she's like got these. Well, I guess then I don't know, but like, do all New York apartments have doormen and
I
porters?
don't I don't think most of them do. I
So
think they're
it's safe to assume that she has money, right? If
Mhm.
she's in one of those apartments. Okay.
Yeah, and I
So
also think that I mean, I know I'm getting a little ahead, but when she goes or when she goes to the lake house that she bought, I believe she references that she bought that and has never seen it. Like she bought it sight unseen, which I think also would imply that she has money if she's just willing to buy a house that she's never seen before.
I think she's rented it, but certainly on
Oh,
sight
rented
unseen.
it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, certainly sight unseen. So yeah. So we meet Jennifer Jenny Hills. who's having her things put in her car by a porter. And she does tip. I was waiting to see if she tipped, and she did, which is cool. She's good people.
Hmm.
And then we kind of hear the hustle and bustle of the city, of big city living, traffic whizzing by, car horns honking. And then she's driving out of the city, and we get actually see the Twin Towers in the background, which is always weird to see.
Hmm.
And then she's kind of like basically passing through suburban areas, and it's getting less and less uh,
Busy.
densely populated.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now she's on some back roads, and you're kind of getting, for me anyway, I always feel, even though I'm in Texas, I stay in the big cities. You always feel kind of dangerous being like when I was driving to Abilene, it's like we we don't really stop
It's
when we need
a
to.
lot of a lot of the drive from Granbury to Abilene for us was a lot of not want to say abandoned, but it was empty. There was nothing. It
Yeah,
was a little terrifying.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that's what they were kind of going for here. But she stops at a small roadside gas station that only has two pumps. One of those ones like I would never stop at. And she asks the well, sorry, I want to be clear. I'm not blaming her or anything like that. I'm just saying, like for me, I just don't stop at those. But she asked the gas station attendant how far Park Lane Hill is, and he says that it's only half a mile down the road. In the background, we see two guys. They're playing a game with a knife as she was watching, and I happen to know uh, what the name of this game is, and
It's a real game.
it's a real game. It's called Stretch, and it's got even a weirder name, like Humbly Mumbly or something like that. The reason I know this is because I went into detail for the movie April Fool's Day,
Hmm.
which I did an episode on maybe a year or so ago, and they were playing this game as well, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I had to look it up, and here we go. We see it in this movie as well. So yeah, it's called Stretch or Humbly Mumbly.
I will tell you this scene is the first one that really bothered me. I have this thing when we're watching movies that involve any woman at all, where I will gauge whether or not a real woman would do that in real life. And a real woman wouldn't do any of the things that she did at this gas station. There's no way that a woman is going to roll up to a gas station in a town she's never been in with a bunch of men and tell them where she's going, and it's clear that she's alone. She's giving them every way possible to find out exactly where she's going. Because I believe they ask, you rented the house or whatever over there, and they live in this town. They're aware of what house was for rent and that she's alone. No woman would ever give that information away, especially not coming from New York City in the 70s.
Yeah,
I feel like the the director didn't consult any real woman when writing that, because there's not a woman that would do that. Even now, women wouldn't do that, especially not in the 70s, but there's no way.
yeah. Um, which is just one of the terrible parts of our society is that women have to be careful
Hmm.
in everything they do, and like looking over your shoulder when you're walking at night and that sort of stuff. Like it's
When she broke in this movie, she breaks, and I'm not blaming the character, it's the way she's written.
yeah,
Every unwritten rule that women grow up just know. We just know these things that we have to do or have to watch out for. And basically, in this movie, is breaking every single one of them.
which is terrible because it's used against her later on in the movie.
Hmm.
And I was as stunned as she was when the reasoning was. I was like, what are you talking about?" But yeah, so as you were saying, she does says that she's glad to get out of the car to stretch. She's been driving for 3 hours. Um, and then she says that she's just rented the summer house here right by the edge of the river. And then he says that he bets she's going to like it so much that she stays year round. At this point, the interaction, just solely his part of the interaction, I felt like he was fine. He wasn't giving me creepy vibes, but that was me. I don't know. How about you? Was he giving you creepy vibes at this point?
A little bit.
Okay.
And it was mostly just because there were two other men there
Yeah.
in the background who were playing with a knife.
Yeah.
It was very, I can tell you, I would not have stopped at that gas station if
Mhm.
I just saw these three men and two of them are playing with a knife. I'm
Yeah.
for sure not stopping there.
Just keep on driving.
Yes, I
Yeah.
will drive till I run out of gas before I stop there.
I mean, same. I would not have that either.
Yeah.
But I guess we need a movie. Uh, but it could have been written better.
Yeah,
But um, at this point, like she pays $5.20 to fill up her gas tank. I was like,
I'm
wow,
shocked.
yes. So she arrives at her secluded summer home down a tree-lined path. It's kind of a two-story red shingled house with stairs leading up to the door. She gets out of the car to walk around it and she sees the river and does the weirdest runs.
Again, thing a real woman wouldn't do. There's not a world where I'm leaving my car door open in a neighborhood I don't know and running and taking off my clothes to run in a lake. That's not a thing. She's not going to do that.
Yeah, and just the way she did it was just like she kind of kept her hands at her side, but they were flailing. It was just the weirdest run I've ever seen.
Yes.
But she's so happy she decides to do a little skinny dipping. And really, it's an idyllic scene, right? It's beautiful, like the nature and all sort of
Hmm.
stuff. And just her there being happy, uh, uh, the sounds of the water. And then there's like a red and white canoe floating in the water. And then suddenly it kind of pulls back and there's a POV from across the river through some bushes. We get the feeling that somebody is watching her. And this is where the feeling of her being unsafe starts.
Hmm.
What did you think of that like viewpoint, that point of view from across the river, and like how did you feel there?
It's uncomfortable. Um, I mean, while I don't think that any woman on earth is just going to walk up and take off their clothes for the very first time seeing a house and jump in a lake, um, I I also think that if that is something that she chooses to do, she should be able to do it without being gawked at from across the lake.
Yeah,
But it also makes you aware of how unaware of her surroundings she is. Like she's not paying attention to her surroundings at all. Like she's being watched and she's not aware of it. She's very unaware of what's going on around her. That someone is could be watching her is a thought that she doesn't have in that moment, and she should be having it because she clearly is being watched. But
yeah.
she's very unaware of her surroundings in that moment.
And if for us as the viewer, as the audience, we feel like a voyeur, right? Because we're
Hmm.
we're also across the river staring at
Watching.
her,
Hmm.
watching her when we kind of shouldn't be. That's the feeling we get. And then even later on in the movie, when we're kind of subjected to being voyeurs as well, you feel really not good about it at all.
Hmm.
So later, she's in her room, she's hanging up her clothes, and she's putting some clothes away in a drawer, and she finds a pistol. She's not quite sure what to do with. At the same moment, we hear a bicycle bell ringing outside, and then there's a knock on the door, kind of an impatient knock. One of my pet peeves is impatient knocking, like on a door. Like that is so rude to me, especially like people who come door to door trying to sell stuff. I work from home and it
Hmm.
happens all the time. Like when I go to knock on somebody's door, I'll wait like a minute in between. And it's only two. You get one knock, a minute, and then another knock, and then I'm
Yeah.
gone. Like here I'll have like 10 seconds between knocks, and I'm already pissed by the time I come to the door. It's not a good tactic, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
not.
but she goes down, she opens the door and she finds a local delivery boy, Matthew from the grocery store. He's kind of your typical 70s nerd, but he's kind of coded as gender divergent. Here you could tell like he perhaps is on the autism spectrum. At least
Hmm.
that's what I was getting from this character. Is that what you were getting? Or
Yeah.
what were you
It
getting from him?
it f- it flows. Some parts in the movie I feel like he is portrayed as someone who's on the spectrum, and then there are different sections in the movie where he's portrayed as someone who's not, and it flows depending on what's going on in the movie. I feel like there's certain scenes where he's not, and then other scenes where it's like he kind of, I don't want to say plays dumb, but they very much dumb down this character in a lot of scenes, and then other scenes they make him a genius. And I feel like it's not consistent throughout the whole movie.
Okay. I'd love for you, if you remember when that comes up, if you can point that out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one scene in particular, I actually wrote it down, where he basically becomes a genius out of nowhere. And I
I think I
was,
know what you're talking about. Is it
y-
involved a knife?
yes, it does.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, the whole movie, he's like incapable of taking care of himself, basically. And now all of a sudden he's coming up with this award-winning idea to trick people. And I'm so confused how we got here.
Yeah. So he introduces himself, and he says that she introduces herself. And she says that she's from New York. He's like, "Oh, you're from an evil place," and she's like, "Well, here's a tip from an evil lady." So uh, I find it funny how she's from New York and she's from an evil place, but yet everything that happens here,
Hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
they're the ones that are evil. So again, to your point, he asks her if she's by herself, and she says, "No, well, she's with Mary Selby." And Mary Selby is a fictional character that she's writing. So we find out she's a writer, and she's here to write her first novel. And he's never heard of her. She says it's because, all my stories, she's written short stories before, and her stories were published in women's magazines. He asks about a boyfriend, and she says that she has many. And I think obviously she's just, joking around, or even if
Hmm.
she isn't, she could have many, that's fine. But he asks if they can be friends, and she says, sure. And he says, anytime you need me, just call me and I'll be there super fast. And off he goes on his bike.
This
Uh,
entire interaction made me uncomfortable.
well, I just want to say that term super fast comes up later.
Hmm.
Okay, so what in particular about this makes you uncomfortable?
All of it. Um, I don't, again, it goes back to I don't think a woman would do that, especially if she's alone, regardless of how they're portraying him. Um, they're trying to make him appear to be dumb or, whatever. But she's still, how can I word this? She's still not safe with him, even if she doesn't, like, even if nothing's happened yet, he hasn't done anything yet. She's giving away too much information about her being alone, and she's almost like flirting with him. And I'm not blaming her. She is written this way. But I do feel like it's an interaction that the director wrote without consulting any women. Because again, I don't know any woman who would react that way. I just don't. Who would let this delivery person in the house? We get groceries delivered all the time. They constantly offer to carry the groceries in for me. And I'm like, I got it. Thanks. Like I'm
Yeah,
not, you're not inviting them in. You're not having them, you're not then flirting with this person you don't know who's delivering your groceries while you're alone in the middle of the woods. It's the
yeah.
whole interaction made me so uncomfortable.
Um, and to your point, the director Meir Zarchi perhaps saw that they could be criticized for the movie, and the writing, and so the initial first draft, or the initial script, and also it was their shooting script. While they're shooting, it said it was directed by a woman. I'm sorry, written by a woman. I forget the name that he used. And then halfway through shooting, everybody's like, "Well, what are we ever going to see the writer?" Sorry if anybody's listening and picking up my stomach grumbles. I forgot that you prefaced. I apologize. I'm not going to edit that out. Um, so the writer, like, they were asking, when's the writer going to come to set? And he's like, finally on the day of. He's like, oh, she's already here. And I'm like, who is she? And like, it's me. So he hired people like, actors and everybody else to come on this movie, thinking that it was written by a woman, and it was in fact just written by him. So you can obviously tell there's a lot of, like you're saying, decisions that were made by Jennifer
Hmm.
that a real woman wouldn't have done, or perhaps he could have spoken to a woman and made it more of a
Hmm.
well-rounded character
To
or
get
something.
a woman's perspective on, because,
Yes.
I when Bill's writing his scripts, I read them as they go. and I haven't really had to give any input on it. He writes women very well, but if I were that director's wife reading that script, I would have made him change everything because none of that is believable, and it makes it it just doesn't. I don't know what I don't even know how to word it. It's just every decision made is very uncomfortable. She's there's no woman that exists like that. They're just they just don't exist. Women are much smarter about taking care of themselves and focusing on their surroundings and being very aware of what's going on around them. So, that just is not believable.
I would say even more so coming from the evil quote unquote big city,
Hmm.
right? Like, because
Especially the New York City in the
New York
70s and
City.
80s is not what it is now. It was, I, Bill was explaining to me how much more dangerous it was in the 70s and 80s.
um,
So she would have been much more aware of her surroundings and much more, you know, closed up so she could protect herself. I
right.
don't think that that would have transferred. Like she magically crossed from the city to the country, and now she doesn't care about protecting herself. That's not a thing.
I wonder if, and first of all, I agree with you. Just thinking, I wonder if perhaps the character is like, I'm out of the city now. I can breathe. People are a little bit more friendly. Like everybody always has the idea, like, oh, people are nicer in the country. People are assholes everywhere you go.
Yes, everywhere. I did actually have that exact same thought. I was talking to Bill about it because I'm like, that's the only thing that I can think of why the writer would have written that she completely lets down all her guards when she goes from the city to the country is that maybe that was the thought is she's in, I don't want to say constant danger in the city, but in New York City in the 70s, yes. And then she comes to the country, she could have felt safer, which I will give it the benefit of that doubt right there.
Well, but also, if that were the case, it should show up in the writing somehow.
Yes.
You know, she could say something or an internal monologue, something like that, right?
Hmm.
But so we're left to make this assumption, which doesn't go to like good writing.
Yeah.
So later, Matthew leaves her house and goes out to the gas station and tells the three guys from earlier. So there was Johnny, the gas station owner, then there's Stanley, and there's Andy. Now, in my writing, Stanley and Andy probably change in my script. They change back and forth because it's hard for me to keep track of them. They're
It's also hard to tell them apart.
yeah,
They
so
they
yeah,
have a
that's what I'm
very
saying.
similar look.
They both have the no shirts. I guess one
Hmm.
has ends up wearing like suspenders, but even then, like it's
They
so
they
so I
look it's like a cardboard cutout. They just look exactly the same. Yeah.
yeah. And so in the while I'm talking about them, I may switch their names and just forgive me,
I
but
wouldn't know the difference. It's totally
yeah.
fine.
So then they're talking about Jenny. Matthew says that he saw her tits. Now, I don't know if he's just exaggerating to like show off in front of the boys, or if he was the guy, if he was the point of view from across the lake that we saw earlier. What did you think of
I
that?
thought it was that he was the point of view from across the lake.
Okay.
Um, just because I think there's another scene later where he's watching her. I think he shows up at night. Um, I can't remember. It's like later in the movie. I thought it was him that showed up at night and she like walked outside in the pitch black looking for the sound she heard. And I thought that was him.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of just thought that he was the person watching her from across the lake.
Okay. So he says he saw her naked. They don't believe him. So he asks if they want to do something, but they're kind of like bored. They're basically townies, right? They kind of go off mumbling to themselves. Later, they're in the woods. They're fishing. One of them wonders if beautiful women ever have to take shits. This is like
This is the
something that
dumbest conversation I've ever heard in my life.
this is like people guys who have never been around women.
Yes, I'm convinced they don't have moms or sisters because I'm so confused as to why this would be a topic of conversation.
Yeah. And then one funny line here was like, I think it was Johnny who says they all do, and then so Matthew is in the bushes taking a shit, and he says, "Not my mother." I was like, okay, that's a little bit funny there. But yeah, this was a very weird conversation. But we find out that Matthew is a virgin, but Johnny says, not for long, we're going to hook him up with a girl. So when I heard that, I was like, oh man. So I've seen
Yeah.
this movie maybe, I'm old, maybe 20 years ago. And I was always like, that's a really nasty film. I don't think I need to watch that again. And so I never had uh, any reason to up until now. Um, but like I was starting to get flashbacks of what was happening, like what was going to happen. I was like, oh man, I'm not looking forward to this sort of stuff. But like that one line there, like I'm gonna hook him up with a girl. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, because I had completely forgotten about the Matthew character.
Yeah.
The Matthew character seems a bit egregious because you end up sympathizing a bit with him because he is put in a situation like he's obviously not all there. Like he has whatever, if he's on the spectrum or if he's, I'm not I don't know. Like I'm a health expert, so I don't know exactly what his issue is, but he's obviously not all there, and so he's kind of maybe forced to do it, but also does, like you were saying, does it on his own as well. And so like you
I feel like they write the character in such a way that the writer wants you to sympathize with him a little bit as if like he's also sort of a victim, but I, I feel like a hard it's a stretch
right,
to I mean there are certain times initially I sympathized with him until he helps with what happens by holding the foot. Then I was like, nope, he's all in on this, and I don't feel bad for him.
right, up to a certain point, and then
Yeah.
after that, it's like because
Hmm.
because you can tell that he knows he's doing wrong.
Hmm.
And at that point that you know you're doing wrong, you can stop and you don't
Hmm.
stop, then you're
And
fully
that's the
punished.
moment where you're responsible for what you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andy says that Matthew isn't into girls. Matthew says from the bushes, he says he is, but only special ones. They ask, oh, like who? And then he says, Miss Hills. They're like, who the hell is Miss Hills? And he says it's the woman who just took the house by the lake. He says that she gave him $1 tip. And Johnny says that they're all loaded from all the girls from New York are loaded. And then Stanley says that they all sleep around as well. Then they get into this conversation about wanting to go to New York and California to have sex. And it's like, sure. Um, and then which state is the best state to find easy women? And so then that kind of ends that really weird bro
Mhm.
conversation.
It's very bro.
Yeah.
The conversation is terrible.
Um, the next day, Jenny is in the canoe. She's kind of just like relaxing in there, just or she's is is it a canoe or a rowboat? I don't know the difference.
I
I've never done either.
think it's a canoe.
Okay,
I don't know the difference either.
yeah. So she's on the water in a vehicle or something, and later we see her in a hammock and she's writing her story on yellow legal pad and a Sharpie, which I am in the process of. Uh, so I've started writing comics recently, and I'm like in the process
I
of
read one.
writing my. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
really good.
thank you. I co-wrote that with my friend Zach. It's called Haunted Rental. Everybody in the
I
Patreon.
laughed quite a bit. That it's pretty funny.
Thank you. So I'm writing another one for my friend Max Booth, who I am under his podcast network, has a show in March called the Ghoulish Book Festival in San Antonio, and so I'm writing a second one for that. It's a completely different story, but um, I the kernel of the story that I'm writing in the comic book right now started on yellow legal pad with a Sharpie. So it's just, and then my wife Hillary helped me type it up because she's a faster typer than I am, and then I adapted it into a comic script. But like, so seeing somebody writing on a yellow legal pad with Sharpie, I was like, yeah, I think they got that one part correct.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we get this really great shot of her in the foreground in the hammock, the river's in the mid section, and then the boat is way off in the background. And that's one thing I'll say about the movie, regardless of subject matter, or for me anyway, regardless of the subject matter, I think that there were it was shot pretty well.
Mhm.
Cinematography was pretty great in the movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
there were some really, really good shots in the
yeah.
movie. Hmm. And they had a great, I mean, the location was really beautiful as well.
Yeah, so this was shot in 78. I think later, yeah, obviously in 80 or 81, I don't remember right now. Um, uh, Friday, Friday the 13th was shot on the same lake
Oh,
later
I
on,
didn't
two
know
years
that.
later. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
So then we kind of start hearing cat calls or greetings, depending on what where you come from. I just think of those cat calls,
Mhm.
and then it's kind of interrupting her thinking. She looks over and she gets like this kind of worried look over her face, and she gives them like kind of like a pensive wave, and then kind of goes back to her writing. But then she's interrupted again as the boat approaches noisily, and they kind of do a drive by and kind of stare at her. That they're going in circles, and she's growing more and more frustrated. And the boat is in the air at this point. Like it's they're like doing tricks, kind of like if you were on a motorcycle, you would do a wheelie,
Hmm.
sort of that thing. That's what they were doing with the boat. And I was watching the movie, the documentary growing up with I Spit on Your Grave, and the actor who portrayed that character, I forget who it was, either Stanley or Andy or whatever, said that they were getting it up in the air to simulate or represent an erection, like that they were like, you know, basically showing her that they were interested in her, which is just
I
really
didn't
freaking
put
weird.
that together at all.
Yeah.
And now I am seeing that, and I don't like that.
I'm just giving you more ammo here.
I know, I know. There, you're taking away the last little bits of this movie that I even
Yeah.
liked.
So she ends up going back to the house. And so then this is one of the scenes that you were talking about earlier, where it's at night and she's typing up her notes in front of the fireplace. And I had a question for you. Um, I grew up in the 80s, so I was an 80s baby, and then 90s. Um, I had to use a typewriter in school because this was before we didn't have a word processor or anything like that. Did you ever use a typewriter in school?
No, but I did use a word processor.
Word
Like
processor?
the
Okay.
typewriters that you could like delete on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used one of those, and then in third grade I got computers in my I mean, I was born in 88, so I was
Okay.
by the time I was, in the middle of elementary school, we had computers.
Yeah. I wasn't in high I was it wasn't until high school until I got a computer. And so I was typing up like my all my reports on a typewriter. We had one of those that was like a case, so it would when you used it, you had to unlock it like it was
Oh,
a
take like the
briefcase.
the lid off. Yeah,
Yeah,
my
take the lid
grandmother
off.
had one of those.
Wow. Okay, there's no need. There's no need for that kind of language here.
No, it
But
always made me nervous to think like the I would have so much anxiety typing on a typewriter because you can't make a mistake.
well, you had the whiteout. But yes, I agree. But I remember having to change the ribbon, and oh man, it was something else. People just don't know. The kids nowadays just don't know. Get off my grass. But all right. So at night she's reading in bed, and then we hear what I thought at first was like a bird whistle, but
Hmm.
then it keeps going, and then we realize that it's a human person whistling. She ignores it at first, but then the whooping starts, and hollering or whatever, and she goes outside to see what's happening. What do you think about here? Because I think that a woman wouldn't do that, and you said that I think
I
also.
I have that in my notes. I wrote again, no woman would do
Yeah,
any of this. She's not walking out into the dark night alone to investigate what is clearly a man calling. She's not going to do that. It's first of all, it's nighttime, and she goes out. She doesn't even if you do go out, you're going to take a weapon of some kind, even if it's a hammer or like a knife from the kitchen. You're not going to go out. You're exposing yourself to danger by going outside in the dark when you clearly know there are men or at least one man hiding in the woods.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, as a man, I wouldn't probably go out there either. I'd be like,
No.
no, there's people out there. Why am I going to go out there? I'll
Yeah,
stay
I'm
here.
gonna lock the doors and I'm gonna stay
Yeah.
in here and they'll go away.
Yeah. So, but she does go outside. She kind of stands out there, kind of staring off into silence for a bit and doesn't see anything. Just crickets and some birds, and then the darkness as the camera kind of pans around. Um, she walks down the steps. A great, they had some great lighting here as well. The reason why I say that is because earlier we saw she was in the hammock, and the hammock is right by the water, and so between the water and the house is a picnic table. And so at night here, they lit up both the hammock and the picnic table to
Hmm.
kind of give depth of so we know how far it
She
is,
is.
out there. So I just
Hmm.
thought that was kind of clever lighting there.
Hmm.
But she stares off into the night and then she goes back inside when she doesn't find anything. But she does walk to her room and she pulls out or she looks at the drawer with the gun in it. Okay. So from here on out, I'm going to say huge trigger warning. The next literally almost 30 minutes is just one extended sexual assault scene.
It is 31 minutes and 53 seconds. I timed it.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
absolute.
terribly long for no reason.
Yeah. So I know on the show we typically go scene by scene here, but I have uh not gone into as much detail because it's just not necessary to go into that sort of detail. Um, you get that she was just repeatedly sexually assaulted.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so the next day she's floating in a canoe, she's sunbathing. Suddenly we hear the boat from yesterday approaching with Andy and Stanley. They kind of circle her canoe, they're harassing her and trying to kind of like tip it over. And she like swats at them with an oar. And then they bump into her and they grab her canoe and they kind of drag her along to the shore. And she's yelling at them like bastards and stop it. And they're whooping and hollering. And this whooping and hollering really bothers me because you could tell like they're trying to sound like Native Americans, like they're doing Native American
Hmm.
calls, which is really just really frustrating. Makes me angry. Like they're playing. Like the whole time they're just
Yes. Hmm.
dudes playing. Um, what they would call cowboys and Indians, sort of thing, right? So they get her to the shore, they push her out of the canoe, and she runs. Then they're chasing behind her, yelling. She runs deeper into the woods, and then suddenly Johnny appears on her path and knocks her down. And they viciously attack her and SA her. The most important part for us to remember here or to know here is that Matthew shows up. And like I was saying earlier, when Matthew showed up, I was like, oh my God, what the hell? Johnny yells at him that they got her for him, but he doesn't do it. What happens is there's 4 rounds, which is that's why it's 32 minutes, like you're saying. It's
Hmm.
just like one attack over the other. This is probably the most horrific sexual assault scene that I've seen. Like I've seen Irreversible by Gaspar Noé. Not sure if you've seen
Yeah,
that one.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and
That
that
was
one's
upsetting, but it's not filmed in such an exploitative way like I Spit on Your Grave is filmed.
yeah. Um, so the idea of what happens here, like happening one after another, and her thinking that she got away, but then like kind of showing up. I'm struggling because I wonder if they hadn't made it so long. I
Hmm.
wonder if it would have been different because it's a interesting concept, and I'm not saying that like sexual assault part of it is interesting. It's the fact that they're manipulating her psychologically
Hmm.
to think
So
that she's
she's
okay.
being um she's being assaulted even when she's not being physically assaulted because she
Right.
thinks she gets away and then they get her again. And then she thinks she gets away and they get her again. So it's like that little in between parts where she's stumbling around the woods naked. Um, and then they take that safety away that she thinks she has, that she thinks she's finally safe and they take it away. So it's like being essayed and also just assaulted at the same time, if that makes sense. I'm trying to word it like
No, yeah.
the mental and emotional assault that they're doing on her with also the physical assault is unnecessary.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. That's so I think that part's interesting. It also makes it terrible, but I feel like perhaps if they had cut it down from 30 minutes to like, I don't even know, five
Well,
minutes or
I
less,
can tell
like,
you the revenge total is about 17 minutes. So they could have cut that essay section down to 17 minutes or
yeah,
less, and it would have been more than fine. We didn't need, a whole half hour of assault in the movie to make the movie good. Like the movie would have been better without it, without so
yeah.
much of it.
So one thing that I did hear on the documentary growing up with I Spit on Your Grave, uh, so, so they took comments from the public, and one person who was actually in the theater like when it was uh being shown like first run, like so it's in 1980. He was there with a date. Excuse me. He was there with a date, and um he was appalled by the behavior of the men in the theater at the time when this section was happening. They were also like whooping and hollering and like,
I
get
think
her,
that
get
was
her.
a part of Ebert's review too, that he
Oh,
was
really?
upset. I think one of the things in his review is there was a man either next to him or two people over who was cheering during this scene, scenes plural, and Roger Ebert was disgusted and wanted to say something, but figured like if you're this man who's well into your 50s and you're you know cheering on a scene like this, like you are who you are at this point, so saying anything doesn't really change the fact that you're this person who thinks this is okay.
Right.
So I mean, Ebert had a big issue with that too, with the men in the theater being uh like cheering it on.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine what kind of person you are like
I
to do that.
No, I especially some of those people went with their wives and their partners, and I mean,
Yeah.
can't even imagine what they thought of them after seeing that behavior at a movie like this.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. But this particular person was like, yeah, they were whooping and hollering, and then he's like, oh, okay, so you should also be whooping and hollering when she gets her revenge later on in the movie. But when that happened, he said the theater was completely silent, almost as if they were in the theater by themselves. And so I think what the director said was that he was just trying to show both sides of it, and like I don't know, like trying to maybe. I'm sorry, I'm just struggling with this part, but like trying to say that like, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you, sort of thing.
I also have I have a lot of issue with the revenge in this movie. I mean, obviously we aren't there
Yeah,
yet, but I have not as much of an issue with the revenge as I do with this entire 31 minutes. But I don't feel that the revenge is good in
yeah,
this,
okay,
considering what we just had to sit through. We just sat through 31 minutes of this horrific thing, where we're basically watching this woman be tortured for 31 minutes. And then I feel like the revenge is very anticlimactic. It's just not what the audience deserves and what she deserves after, a half hour of that.
Yeah. So she does end up making it to the house, and she's about to make a phone call, and she manages to get the receiver and dial. Someone picks up, but just then a violent kick. Um, Somebody kicks the receiver out of her hand. It's the rapists again, and at this point, uh, this is when Matthew actually participates, and at this point, he is beyond redemption.
Mhm.
And then with that, the men leave the house.
Well, before they leave, though, they
Yes,
do a thing that's also unnecessary after watching 31 minutes, where they tear up her book that she's writing.
right, right, yeah.
And it's like,
Ridicule her.
yes, it's like it's it's added assault to a very, very, very aggressive assault that we just witnessed for a half an hour. And then to add that little bit of insult to injury is like, you can't just you've already done what you've done. Can you just leave? You don't have to come in and rip up this thing. It's like they're taking away like they took away her identity in that 31 minutes. For that 31 minutes, I should say. They take that part of her away, and then they also take away a thing that means a lot to her, that she's specifically there because she cares about this book and wants to write it, and they take that away as well by destroying it. And I just felt that was incredibly unnecessary.
Yeah, yeah, that was just like misogynists. Like,
Mhm.
can't. He even says it later. He doesn't like women bossing him around, but like they can't stand the idea of maybe a woman being smarter than them, being independent, being able to write a book. They're probably barely literate, sort of
Mhm.
thing, and so they take that out on her. Um, in this scene, I won't go into detail, but one of the things that truly broke my heart was like the last person she like says she's hurt and please she'll do it she'll do something else,
Mhm.
and then that transpires, but just like having to make a deal with your
Attacker.
attacker is
Mhm.
just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, that broke me a
Yeah.
bit too. Yeah.
So before we move on, was there anything about the rape section or the sexual assault section of it that you wanted to that we may have missed that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, it's basically what we said. It's just 31 minutes of torture for
Yeah.
this poor woman at the hands of these men. And I genuinely think Michael's the one, right? The delivery boy. Is that
Matthew.
Michael? Matthew. Um, Matthew, like you had said, he's irredeemable at the end of this. And I feel within the first few minutes, he is completely irredeemable. There's nothing good about him. Um, but at the end, when he participates, is when I wanted him to get the worst revenge, because it was like when you see him kind of pop in the beginning, it's like a little bit of hope, like, oh, maybe he'll help. And then he just doesn't. And she also has that look in her eyes when she sees him, like, oh, he'll help. And then he doesn't.
Yeah.
So I hated him the most out of all of them. And I hate them all, but I didn't like him at all.
Yeah. And it hurts because she had said, "Do you want to be my friend?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll be friends." Or he had said, "Do you want to be my friends?" Yeah, yeah, we'll be friends.
Hmm.
So the good thing is that that's over now. And in
Yes.
fact, while they were filming the movie, the director Meir Zarchi, they kind of filmed in order because he's like, I don't want to lose my main actress. And you maybe you can attest to this. When you're making films, sometimes you shoot out of you film out of order depending on when you have locations for how long and
Hmm.
what scene. And sometimes people have to be like, okay, in this scene you're at a 10 intensity level, but maybe the next day you're filming a scene that you're at a 2 intensity level, sort of thing. Whereas in this one, they kind of shot in order because they didn't want her to have to continually be going back into that mindset of
Well,
being,
that's got to
insane.
be hard. I mean, we did group in that subject matter. I mean, obviously nowhere near this. But it was also a little heavy. So it was good to put everyone to go in order for group because it allowed that each actor to be in that mindset for a specific amount of time, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And they were able to get out of that mindset and into a different one. And this, I spit on your grave. I mean, I can't imagine where she had to go mentally to do this movie and to think. I mean, that's at least one thing that the director and writer did right. Is letting her get it all over with at once
Yeah.
instead of making her continuously go back.
Yeah. So then they're leaving, and Johnny realizes that she's a witness to their crimes and orders Matthew to go back and stab her to death. Matthew cannot bring himself to do it, so when he goes inside, he do you want to explain actually what happens here?
He becomes a genius.
Yeah.
He decides that he's gonna make the other guys think that he killed her. So he dips the end of the knife in her blood, um, and then leaves and shows them the knife as proof that he stabbed her. Um, how he came up with that idea, I don't know, considering that up until this point he is nowhere near smart enough to do that. And then all out of the blue, he's, like I said, a genius.
Yeah.
But he tries to trick them into thinking that he killed her when he didn't.
And he even had the wherewithal to get both sides of the blade.
Hmm.
Because when he was doing it, he did one side. I was like, "Oh yeah, you're good." And then I was like, "Just walk away." And then we did the second one. I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess so." Like
Yeah, I
there
wouldn't have
would there
thought of
would
that
be
either.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So he goes back to the other rapists, and then he takes they take off in their speedboat. And then this is when I noted that it was 30 minute scene, and I was like, it's absolutely uncalled for at that point. Like to
Hmm.
just and like for me, like I had to pause it because I was taking notes and rewind it because I went to like somebody said something, and so I was like, I was probably on this scene for like an hour. At this point, I just had to take a break. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a
No, I
break now.
don't blame you. So when we watched this, because I've never seen this before, so we watched it once through without me taking any notes or really like I was just watching the movie to watch it. And then we watched it a second time so that I could, because I was convinced that this essay scene was so long. I read on IMDb it was 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and I was like, there's no, it's longer. I know it is. So from the moment we started recording, or I started timing it from the moment that they take control of her boat, because at that moment she's not in control anymore, and they are. So
Yeah,
from that moment until the moment that he, you know, kills her, quote unquote, yes, 31 minutes. And watching that back the second time, I was like, all right, we don't ever have to watch this movie again. I don't ever
yeah,
need to see this.
yeah.
It was
Um,
enough.
I think for me too. I think
Yeah,
for me too.
yep.
Yeah. Um, so then we're inside the house, and we see Jenny's in the bathtub. The water's running over her. She's on her knees and she's crying, and then we see her, which was just heartbreaking. Just to see that was absolutely heartbreaking. And then she's in her robe and she's kind of breaking down after her ordeal. Later in bed, she's covered in wounds and she has ice and bandages on stuff. And then she sits in a chair. She's kind of unmoving. She's smoking a cigarette, just staring blankly. And then then we see fog blanketing the lake. And then that's kind of like the end of the first half of the movie.
Well, the one scene in that post essay section that really kind of broke my heart was when she's taping the pages of her book back together because
Mhm.
they ripped it. It was like, oh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's symbolic, but it's like that's sad to watch that after all she's been through. Now she's sitting here trying to piece back her book.
Yeah. That's coming up right now, this next scene here. So after some time has passed, which we find out is about 2 weeks, we see Jenny walking down some abandoned train tracks. We then see her like sitting in nature, and we see that her face is horribly like kind of scarred and disfigured, which I didn't realize that they had cut up her face as well
I
in
didn't
the whole
remember
scene.
seeing that.
Yeah, that she had like a scar
My
along her
only
jawline.
my only thinking is It could have been from the rock scene
Yes. Yeah, I think
because
so.
of the way her head is laying in that scene. It could have caused the cuts on the face.
And there's actually a IRL reason for the placement of the scar, which I'm going to get to in a second. But yeah, so her face was, and I probably you're right, would have come from that part of the movie.
Hmm.
So she then sees her canoe drift on by and makes um what's the word I was thinking of? It just comes onto shore. And so she walks over to it and drags it up the embankment. And I wonder if at this point, if the canoe represents like her resolve to get her life back on track, because after this, she kind of starts working towards that, I think.
Hmm. I think maybe it was because the canoe is what started all of it. So, in my mind, it's like a I don't want to say a trigger for her, but it's like seeing that wash up is almost I feel like it almost does trigger her mentally to go fix her life. Like it's like a way of saying that it's all over, all of that part, because they took the boat in the beginning, they took her on the boat, and then that gave them control over her, and then the boat comes drifting back to her. It's like a way of her regaining control by getting the the boat back.
Yeah. So then later we do see her, like you're saying, putting together the scraps of her work that they had ripped up. And to me, it felt like she was just trying to get her life back together as well,
Hmm.
which was kind of like heartbreaking. Later at a local diner, the four rapists are there. They're eating and drinking, and Johnny like complains that he's bored, that there's nothing to do in town, and he asks if they've gone by her place, and they say no. He's like, well, we haven't heard anything. Basically, it's been 2 weeks, two 90-degree weeks. The body should be like reeking by now, and people should have smelled it. So he's kind of like wondering what's happening, which is like basically he wants the body to be found already, right? He's feeling guilty. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so he tells Matthew, or actually he asks Matthew how and where he stabbed her, and then Matthew explains that he stabbed her real deep, and so deep that he had to jump over the puddle of blood, right? So Johnny tells Matthew to go look at the body, but he refuses. And Stanley, in a crowded restaurant, yells out, "Well, you killed that someone." And Johnny smacks the shit out of him because, like, dude, we're literally like amongst company. And then we kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into the dynamic because Johnny quote unquote, apologizes by like lightly smacking him again, like Stanley again. And it's like, come on, give me one of your lady killer smiles, which we ends up giving, which is just a really creepy fucking smile.
That's incredibly creepy.
Yeah. At this point, he tells Andy and Stanley to go have a look. So they do. They go have a drive-by on their boat, and they see Jenny sitting by a tree. The next scene is Matthew getting beat up. They're beating the shit out of him for lying, right?
Hmm.
And they tell him to go away, get away from them. He's lucky they don't kill him, and then he rides away on his bike. Later, we see Jenny. She's taking out the gun from the drawer and she kind of loads it. And she goes to church. And for me, as a former Catholic, I went to Catholic school for 8 years. I have a lot of religious trauma, hence my horror confessional. And so we hear pipe pipe organ music playing. And it really reminded me of my childhood here. And it's funny that the person playing, or I don't know if he was actually playing it, but the person playing the priest in there was the director, Meir Zarchi. So he had a little cameo.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I genuinely didn't care for this scene. I I know I feel like on one hand it's like she's asking for some sort of forgiveness ahead of time because she's not a monster like they are. But I also sort of feel like she doesn't need that forgiveness because they tormented her and assaulted her over and over again. I just felt like this scene was unnecessary. I don't know.
It's in the eye. I mean, it's in the Bible, eye for an eye, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what, you know.
Right?
So, but she does kneel in front of the cross and ask for forgiveness. She says, "Forgive me for forgive me," and she walks out. Um, she then drives to the garage, um, or the gas station where Johnny works, and she's kind of like surveilling him. And at this point is when I noticed that the scarring had gone down a lot. So in the previous scene, it was like really red, and you could see like it looked just it had not healed very well. This one
Mm-hmm.
it was really subdued, and the reason why is because the scar on the left side of Jennifer's face is real. It's the result of a car accident in Camille Keaton's youth. So
Oh,
in the
that's
post-trauma scenes, the makeup artist exaggerated it, um, but in the scenes afterwards, it was hidden under a thin layer of
mm-hmm.
foundation.
Hmm.
So it was actually
Interesting.
there. Yeah. So while she's there, kind of spying on him, a car drives up, and it's Johnny's wife and his two kids, who he hugs and kisses them all. I'm like, how fucking dare you? Like,
Yeah, this scene bothered me. One because it doesn't ever come to anything. It's not really like the introduction of the wife and children is, crucial to any part of the revenge because it's not. Um, but I also kind of felt like it was in a weird way trying to humanize him by making him he did this terrible thing, but he's a family man, so like I kind of felt like they were trying to make it like he's not a monster, he's a human, but
I see that.
he's a monster.
Yeah, I see that completely. I took it as the monsters are among us, sort of thing.
Oh yeah, that's I didn't
Um,
even think of it like that.
because and we know, like we've seen repeatedly, the politicians that like rail against uh gay people or something like that are some of the most closeted people, and
Hmm.
are and to just like hate themselves, sort of thing. So that's how I took it. It's just like, um yeah, he's a monster hiding in the skin of a human.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that's a really good point.
But so at this point, Jennifer's got a real cool look with her. I just thought, she's got like glasses and a black scarf that's covering her hair. I kind of liked her look here.
Hmm.
Um, Later, she's following Matthew as he makes a delivery. Then she calls in an order. And when Matthew hears that there's an order for the house on Parkview Lane, he gets extremely nervous. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
starting off with Matthew, I like this. Yeah,
Yeah, I was happy she started off with Matthew.
yeah. And he's kind of bruised up as well because he just got beat up by the guys. And he can't even look at the order. He's just like ridden with guilt and nervousness. And then for some reason, we see a butcher sawing a pig in half, which didn't really care for. Wasn't quite sure what they're trying to insinuate
Yeah, I
there.
wasn't sure the purpose of that.
Yeah, me neither. And I'm hoping it was nothing, just to show that it was a butcher's. So reluctantly, Matthew grabs the order, but he also grabs the knife off the counter and heads to the house. And he bikes up there, unsure of what's happening. He kind of slow walks his bike up the rest of the way. And suddenly Jenny is there. She's in an all white dress. And she said, "You came super fast, Matthew," which is what he said he would do if she ever needed help
Hmm.
early in the movie when they first, he's like, "Just call me and I'll come super fast." So he gasps, and she goes off into the woods, and he follows her, and she goes deeper in, and he's got his knife like just drawn above his head. I'm like, what the fuck, Matthew? You have like completely lost it here. Like he is gone from, you know, innocent kid who's like, or possibly on the autism spectrum to be like full blown murderous villain.
Hmm.
Like what a turn! Like,
It's like a switch in that
yeah.
one scene.
So she calls to him and he says that he hates her. She's like, "What have I done to you?" And he says that you brought nothing but bad luck. I was like, oh boy. So, but she's wearing, there's like a slit in her dress, which is revealing her leg and thigh, and like trying to seduce him. And he says, I have no friends now because of you. And what I didn't like here is she seduces him, and they actually,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're. Yeah,
yeah,
I wrote in my notes that I didn't like the revenge because it's sexualized.
yeah,
Like she's once he drops the knife and there's been no sexual interaction with them revenge wise, she didn't have to follow through with any of that. It She re-sexualized herself in order to get revenge. And I didn't really find there was no reason for that. It was unnecessary for that entire interaction to happen.
yeah. It's very, and if I haven't mentioned it before, it's very exploitive, like
Hmm.
which the essay scenes were as well. Like I like the idea of her drawing him in
Hmm.
using what he wants against him,
Hmm.
but I think it just goes too far. I think you could have gotten there way before what happens, where they engage in intercourse and stuff. So
Hmm. That's that's the issue with a lot of this revenge is it's unnecessarily sexualized.
yeah, um, and sexualizes her. I'm
Yes.
okay with the men being sexualized because
Oh,
that's what they did to
absolutely.
her.
Hmm.
But for her to be re-traumatized and re-sexualized in that way, it kind of feels bad. Feels
Hmm.
doesn't feel good. So while that's happening, she reaches for a noose and she puts it around his neck and she just pulls and pulls and pulls and pulls and up the tree and hanging him with his pants still around his ankles. Matthew struggles but is slowly strangled to death as Jennifer watches with a fascinated like look on her face. Um, After that, she cuts the rope and drops the dead body in the river. She then pushes his bicycle and the groceries in as well. And for me, it felt almost like a baptism scene because she goes in halfway through in the water. She's wearing this white dress. If you've seen like some movies where like I don't know if it's what denomination it is, where they literally baptize people in the water, like in a river.
I have
And
seen that.
yeah, and they're all wearing white dresses and white
Hmm.
robes and stuff like that. That kind of reminded me that brought that imagery to mind. Like maybe
Hmm.
she's baptizing herself in her new life, and her new life is getting revenge against these assholes.
Yeah, I can see that. I had the same thought about the white dress in the water. It has a little bit of religious imagery to it.
Right. White signifies like innocence and virginity and all sort of stuff, and she's wearing it while she's um, taking her revenge on these guys. So Jennifer then phones the grocery store to report that Matthew never arrived with her order. So I wanted to pause here for a second. We know how we feel about her being sexualized at this point, but what did you feel about the actual revenge part of it, him getting hung that
I
way?
did like that he was hung with his pants down.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, personally, I think she should have left him hanging there. Um, but I do like that she just pushes him and all of his belongings into the lake and just kind of wipes her hands of it. I do like that.
Yeah, just like discards of him, like the piece of
Hmm.
trash that he is, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so later, Johnny is locking up the gas station, and Jenny drives up, and he says, like she's kind of like looking at him, and he's like saying, "We're closed. Come back tomorrow, whatever." She's giving him like these come hither stares or whatever, and he's like, "I knew you were gonna like it here," which I was wanted to throw up.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
irritating.
and she seductively nods for him to get in the car. So she gets in. She stops on the road to her house like halfway. He gets out of the car, and then he goes to open the door for her. He's like, "Oh, you want me to open the door for you?" And when he does, she points a gun at him, and he's like, "You don't have to force me. I'll do it to you voluntarily." And I'm like, "Please kill this man. Please kill this man immediately."
Also, the audacity of this man, knowing what he had just done to this woman, to think that she would be pulling up in her car and flirting with him, that he is so out of touch that he actually got in the car with her thinking that it was like a voluntary thing. That after
Yeah,
what she did, that he she after what he did, she would want to be with him. The mindset of that man is the ego is so big that he would think that the fact that he got into the car blows my mind.
you know, one point that I wanted to distinguish here is that you said that no woman would act this way, and I completely agree with you. But
Hmm.
I think there are men that would act this way,
Oh, very much.
which is terrifying,
Hmm.
you know. So I just had to sit with that for a second. I just came to me. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, I genuinely think that there are a lot of um bro type men that would very much do something like that and then think that that woman would want to spend time with them. That is a real thing. I think that would happen in real life.
There's one on the Supreme Court right now. So yeah, definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, I totally forgot all about that.
Yeah. So she fires a warning shot, and he's like, "Holy shit!" And then he's like, "Please don't." She tells him to get naked. She forces him on his knees. Um, she he at first blames Stanley, which is funny because later in the movie, Stanley will blame him. Right?
Hmm.
It's never their fault. It's always somebody else. That's the true like coward's way out. And he kind of at this point he invokes his wife and kids, and she's like, "Yeah, you got a nice looking wife and two beautiful kids, and you don't care. You have no guilty conscience." And if he didn't have like the gall on this, he's like, "The thing with you is something any man would have done."
Hmm.
I don't think so. I don't think that's
No,
the case. I
I
think
don't
you're a
think
monster, and
y- uh, the dialogue is just so bad. It's
I think they're
so
truly
bad.
villainous at this point. They're like what like the curly
Yeah,
mustache villain.
the
Yeah, at this point, you know. But he's clearly a misogynist. He insists that the sexual assaults were her fault because she enticed the men by quote unquote parading around in revealing clothing, like getting out of the car and walking up and down and showing legs, showing being naked around Matthew, which he lied about or was a voyeur, like didn't get her consent about.
also the outfit that she's wearing in the beginning, and just a woman should never be blamed for essay by because of what she's wearing under any circumstance. But if we're using that logic that he's trying to say that she enticed him, the outfit she's wearing in the very beginning, the skirt comes down, I'm pretty sure past her
Not
knees.
below her knees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very long. She's showing nothing. It's
And she's
he's
just
just
existing.
she's just existing, and he's using that as a reasoning to sexualize her. I hate these characters so much. I hate them.
Yeah. So when he says this, this look comes over her face and she just like stops advancing, like literally pauses her in her tracks. Like she cannot believe he just said this. And he kind of slowly grabs the gun out of her hands and pulls her down to him. And she like feigns belief in Johnny's ludicrous rant and invites her back to the house for a hot bath. So while taking a bath together, she's like asking about his kids. They're 9 and 10. She asks about his family. He says like he loves them. She asks about the other dudes. He says that we're not really friends. They're just leeches. He's like, I despise people who don't work. There's too much time to get into trouble. Are you listening
I was gonna say, you're
to
so
yourself?
out of touch.
Yeah.
Also, I think that the revenge for him would have been, I mean, granted, I love what happens to him, but I think the revenge would have been better had we completely taken the whole bathtub thing out. And
Okay.
she's not again getting
Sexualized.
nude and sexualized in order to get her revenge. So the she's getting naked and having a very intimate conversation in a bathtub with this man who just, SA'd her. And it's like an intimate scene. And I don't feel like it was necessary to get from where they were in the woods to what happens at the end. That bathtub scene is not necessary. He's naked in the woods. You have a gun in your hand. You could have gotten to the same ending with the gun if you're I'm trying to word this in a way where I'm not.
Yeah, it's happening to the guy. I don't care.
I think that she could have taken care of that appendage with the
Yeah.
gun without needing to bring him back to her house and get in a bathtub with him and do all of that. It could have been handled right there in the woods. I liked the moment where she was in control of him. She made him take his clothes off. She made him get down on his knees. She's pointing a gun at him. That I loved. And then the moment they're affectionate with each other and intimate in the bathtub is just, what in the hell are you doing? What is this?
Yeah, I think it's a very male mindset that violence begets violence. We're like, okay, you did this to me, I'm going to do the literal same thing to you. And where like yourself, and I've heard other women haven't felt that, didn't feel that way, that she needed to be sexualized in that manner. Um, just to offer another viewpoint in the documentary that I read and in some of the criticism I read, women who have gone through SA in their life report of watching this movie as a way of revenge against their assaulters, and seeing that
Hmm.
in that form was really helpful for them.
And I can see how not just this movie, but other rape revenge movies could be very therapeutic for SA survivors.
Yeah, it's just, it could be, a movie could be different things for different people, right? So but he's like, I hate people who don't work, and she's like, well, Matthew works. And so she's bringing him up, and he remembers that the store called him yesterday asking about Matthew. He's disappeared. While that's happening, she's massaging his chest. Johnny says that Matthew's going to show up sooner or later, and she says, no, he won't. He says, sure, he will. He's just cooling off. And she says, yeah, cooling off at the bottom of the river, which I did enjoy. I
I
did enjoy
liked
that
that,
line.
yeah.
Yeah. And then she says that she killed Matthew. And Johnny thinks that she's just joking. She has a morbid sense of humor.
I love the lighthearted way she says it. Like, oh no, I killed him. Like,
Yeah,
it's
matter of
very,
factly.
yeah, I liked that.
Um, she mentions that Matthew was able to fully have sex at that point. At this point, Johnny is kind of near orgasm because she's doing stuff to him under the water. And Jennifer, at that point, reaches out under the rug here and has a butcher knife. It's the same one that Matthew brought, and puts it underwater and then severs his member. And he doesn't realize it at first, which I thought was a really good detail. He's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's so sweet, it's painful." And then we get this splurt of blood which mixes with the soapy water, and then he realizes what happens and he loses his shit. And she very calmly gets out of the tub, puts on her robe, leaves the room, and locks Johnny in from the outside.
I did enjoy this uh the way this revenge ended. I like that she's like sitting and just listening to him scream upstairs. I enjoyed that she was sort of I almost felt like it was like really cathartic for her to like listen to him in pain, knowing that she caused that.
So as you were saying, she's hearing him yelling out in the bathroom. He At one point he's like, "Look what she's done to me," or something like that.
Hmm.
It's like, dude, you did it to yourself.
Yeah, you
Uh,
you deserve that.
yeah. And
But
so he's yelling.
even when he's in pain and he's going through, what he as he's dying from what she's done, it's he doesn't want to take any responsibility for that he is the reason that this happened. It's very much like she did this. She did this. Like
Yeah.
But she wouldn't have done that if you didn't do what you did. There's no accountability taken at all from these guys.
Right. So then she walks over to the living room and she puts on a record and then calmly sits in a chair, rocking herself, and she listens to this record. It's an opera, and I looked it up. It's called Sola Perduta Abbandonato, which translated means roughly means alone, lost, and abandoned,
It's so
which
cool.
really,
It's so
really enjoyed
fitting.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the music really heightens here, and she has this dead stare on her face. And I did want to mention that, as you stated, that there was really not a lot of music in here. So the director was trying to find a score, but really couldn't find anything. And so one of his friends who was working on the film with him, the cinematographer, was like, well, then don't have a score. So really the only time they have music is when it's in the movie, when it's in the, I forget what it's called, that type of music.
I know there's a word for it. I can't
Yeah.
remember what it is.
So it's just that. So like, for example, during the essay scenes, one of the guys was uh, playing
He
a
was playing the
harmonica.
harmonica.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's music. Here, there's music. At the church, there's the organ music. At the restaurant, there's music coming from the radio, but that's
Hmm.
it. There's no other score, which I feel is fitting.
I agree with that. I did write that my very first note on here is there's no music. I come because there's no score. So, listening to those little moments where there is music actually in the movie, I completely forgot they were there
Yeah,
because the majority of the movie doesn't have any.
exactly. So he eventually dies from blood loss. Good riddance. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Yeah.
And he won't be hurting anyone anymore. But Jennifer then dumps Johnny's dead body in the basement and then burns his clothes in the fireplace. And or maybe it's in the furnace downstairs in the basement. But the red lighting on her face as his clothes burns looked so good.
It did look really good.
Yeah. So like this movie has moments. Like it has like we said, good cinematography, good shot composition, nice scenes. I think just the 30-minute long because like as you said, you're a fan of SA movie or rape revenge movies,
Hmm.
and in those movies, there's obviously rape in those.
Hmm.
But to the extent of which this movie has it, I think it really dragged it down for me.
There are lots of rape revenge movies where the rape isn't the main point of the movie. And I feel like with this one, the rape is the main point of the movie, and it's just not that way in other rape revenge movies.
Yeah. So then we see Jenny, she's cleaning the blood off of the bathroom, and then we see Johnny's
I
lifeless
did
blood
like the
in a
scene
closet.
where she's cleaning the bathroom. I don't know what I loved about that. I just thought it was cool that she doesn't have any remorse for what she's done because she shouldn't. But I like that she's just cleaning up the blood like it's nothing. Like she just did this thing, she got rid of this trash, and now she's cleaning up after it. I did
Yeah,
love that scene.
yeah, me too. So that's two down, two to go. So the following day, Stanley and Andy learn that Johnny is missing from his wife. And she's like yelling at them, like, he's loyal to me. He's a good father and a good husband. I'm like, is he though? It's like that Thor meme. Is he though? Um, but she's yelling at them that you're fucking bums. Why do you hang out here all the time? And she kind of rubs them off. And at this point, I was like, do they always not have shirts on? Do they just walk around with no shirts? Is that like the look that you're going for here?
I feel like it's like the stereotypical Southern backwoods thing where they run around shirtless and I feel like it's very stereotypical of what like the Southern middle of nowhere people are portrayed.
I have a feeling like if these guys survived into their 50s, they would have gotten skin cancer like bad. You know, they just don't care. So, so then she's like, I'll break your goddamn heads if you come back here. And she hugs her kids. Like I was saying earlier, those two kids are actually the director's actual real life kids. And what I found out was the director actually went on to marry Camille Keaton, the star of this movie.
I did hear that.
They got married in 1978, and I think they only were married for like 2 years or something like that.
I was curious about that because again, I don't feel like this movie was written by a man who respects women. So I was wondering how he was able to woo her.
Well, it's funny because I think everybody just had nothing but nice things to say about this guy, including Camille Keaton, who was divorced from him. There was a nice scene in Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave, the documentary, where they're interviewing her because the director of that documentary is her stepson. Well, I guess
Mm.
ex stepson. I don't know how that works, but they're interviewing her, and then she's talking about the director Meir Zarchi. She's like, yeah, we were married, and he's a wonderful person. Yeah, we did end up getting divorced, but I love that guy. And then she's like, maybe if, and she kind of trails off. I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? And then when she says that, he shows up in the background. They're surprising her they hadn't seen each other in a very long time. And so there's this very tender moment with them where they like hug and kiss and stuff like that. So like by all accounts, they had a really great relationship, and everybody loved this guy. So it just doesn't translate to what he
Yeah,
wrote.
I'm wondering what
Mhm.
happened from
Yeah.
who he is as a person and the art that he creates.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we do see a lot of times. Just
Yes.
like I can't think of the name, but have you seen like any of those Studio Ghibli films?
Mm-mm.
The animation, the Japanese animation films like My Neighbor Totoro or stuff like that. They're like the Japanese version of Walt Disney of Disney World with so they have
Oh.
their own industry like that has like 20 some films that people love. Like My Neighbor Totoro is one that everybody loves, Cat Bus, that sort of thing. But the writer of that is his name is something Miyazaki, and he writes these wonderful, like beautiful stories for children, but he's in real life is like a tortured soul sort of thing. It's like you just never can tell between what the art the art that is made and the artist, right?
Hmm. I'm also
Um,
sort of chalking some of this things that I hate about this movie up to it was the 70s.
yeah, yeah, I can
So
see
yeah.
that definitely. The viewpoint on women and their right to exist was
Hmm.
definitely different. They take their speedboat to Jennifer's cabin, aware that she might have killed him and Matthew. So she's in there, she's swinging in her hammock, not a care in the world. I love this for her.
Hmm.
And there's actually a nice POV shot from the hammock as it's swinging, and then she hears them approaching. And then she goes like commando on her on their ass. Like I love it because Andy goes ashore with the axe, which we don't see. They don't show him going ashore.
I wrote that in my notes. It's like he teleports. Not
Yeah.
only is he in the boat 1 second and then on the land the next, he's dry.
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
So how did he get there? He did he walk on water from the boat to the land? Because there's no sign that he was in the boat other than we see him come up in the boat.
Yeah. And especially because later, when he's trying to save his friend, he has to go back in the water and he takes off his clothes
Hmm.
to not get wet. Well, then, did you, how did you get on land? Did you take off your clothes and
He's
swim with
magic.
your, yeah. I was thinking the same. I had to literally rewind it 3 times because when I'm watching a movie and taking notes, sometimes I have to put my head down and maybe I might miss something. So, like, I did that 3 times. I'm like, no, he just teleported on land.
Yeah, I said to Bill, I'm like, how, because when he popped up on the land, I was like, wait, he was just in the boat. And Bill's like, are you sure that like, maybe it was just a weird angle. Maybe you thought you saw him. So we rewound it and he's like, oh my God, he really was in the boat. How did he get off the boat?
Yeah. But so Andy went to shore apparently with the axe. And so Stanley's on the boat by himself, and all of a sudden, we see her hands coming out of the water, which were a great visual. I
Hmm.
love that. And then she pulls herself up on the boat, surprising Stanley, and she's like, "I scared you, didn't I?" Huh? Like that, very like aggressive,
Hmm.
which I really, really enjoyed that. And she pushes him overboard, and Stanley has trouble staying afloat. Apparently, he's not a good swimmer. I kind of like this here. What did you? I know that you wish there was more of it. So what were
Hmm.
you feeling here?
I I liked this part more than the other two because of
It wasn't sexual.
yes, it's just her getting her revenge. I did also feel like it was a little convenient. Um, I don't know if maybe the it was written in such a way that she knew because she killed the other two that they would come looking for her, or if it just was happenstance that they rolled up to the house in the boat. Because if it wasn't that she knew killing those first two guys first would make the other two come looking for her, then it's just coincidence and very convenient that they rolled up on the boat and she happened to be able to get her revenge that way. But I did like this revenge a good bit. I liked that this was just her letting out anger on these men.
I agree. I like that. This is what I wish the first two revenge
Mm-hmm.
ones had been, which was non-sexualized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or not re-traumatizing her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
And I like that she uses the symbol of what so like you were saying that when you started timing the SA scenes was when they took control of her boat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now she's taking control of their boat, right? So
Yeah, I did
I like
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she drives the boat a ways and then she comes back and like skims him a bit, like just scaring him like they were doing with her when they were
Mm-hmm.
making doing circles around, which I enjoyed. And he's screaming for Andy's help. And Andy from from the shore is like, "You're a murderer." It's like, I don't think that's hitting the way you think it's hitting, dude. And she continues to drive the boat towards Stanley or Andy, one of them. So, oh yeah, she drives the boat towards shore, and Andy tries to attack her when she speeds past him in the boat, but she escapes, and then the axe drops in the boat, which I was like, dude, you are useless.
Yeah,
Like you are a
he's
complete fucking idiot.
I mean, not that I want him to succeed, but it is funny to watch how useless and, clumsy he is in this moment.
Yeah, like they're literally nobody without like Johnny to be like telling them what to do, sort of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Andy takes off all his clothes to swim out to rescue Stanley.
Which I'm sorry if I'm being attacked in the water and I'm calling for help from my friend and they take the time to take off all their clothes before they get in the water, we're not friends anymore. Just jump in.
Well, if I'm being honest, I'm not going in the water for you. I love you, friend, but you're dead.
You're
You're
on your
dead.
own.
You're on your own. You know, I got to fight for myself at this point. We put up a good fight, but you know, it's fine. But yeah, so he's a way better friend than I am. But he does jump in the water to try to help. But suddenly Jenny revs up the boat and attacks again. And then Jennifer plunges the axe into Andy's back, killing him. Now, this scene, which for the Patreon subscribers is my background, for me is the shot of the movie. It is so cool and I love it. And it's so, well, I'm not a woman, so I can't say, but for me, it would feel empowering to see this.
Hmm.
I just thought that it was such a great shot, but I wanted to ask you what you thought of this.
I loved this. I liked this the entire last two revenge. I love that the boat was used against them when they used that against her in the beginning, and I love that the weapon he brought with to try and use on her, she turned and used on him. I love this is the most if I mean I don't really think there's any revenge in this movie that's poetic, but this is the closest you get to poetic justice for this movie anyway.
Yeah. And it's also maybe the most horror.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, things that happened were horrific, but I'm just saying, as far as genre is concerned, probably the more horror parts because we do get some practical effects of a axe going into some rubber and
Mm-hmm.
blood, but we do get some practical effects here. So she backs the boat up, and Andy grabs hold of the motor to kind of climb on board,
I did love this part.
begging Jennifer not to kill him and blaming Johnny for making him do it, which we got had earlier. Johnny blamed him, so they're cowards to the end.
Is this the guy who's begging her? Is that the one that she also begged? during the essay scene? Is it the
Yes.
same guy?
Yes,
Because
that's why
again, they
what
all
she
look
says.
alike.
Yeah, that's why she says what she says in a second here. So she's looking down at her attacker, and with very cold eyes, she smirks at him and quotes what he said to her while he was assaulting her: "Suck it, bitch," and starts the engine, disemboweling him underwater.
That was so awesome.
As Andy and Stanley's dead bodies sink beneath the surface of the water, Jennifer drives away or pilots away. I don't know what you said in the boat, but drives away. She speeds away in the boat, and a slight smile, just the slightest smile, comes across her face. And then the credits roll. So a lot of stuff happened there. I want to go back first to just the way that Andy was killed with the "suck it, bitch" and the disemboweling. What did you think of that?
I loved that. I thought
Yeah.
the that was my out of the last two revenges, that one was my favorite. Um, because she got to use his own words against him, and also she used the boat. Like she literally used the boat to kill him.
And that was Camille Keaton's idea to say "suck it, bitch."
I
No
love that. Of
coincidence.
course it was. Of course the best line in the movie is written by a woman.
Yeah. So then, what about the slight smile on her face? What did you think of that?
I thought it was a great way to end the movie. I mean, it was good to see that she had some sort of, I don't want to say joy. I feel like that's the wrong word, but peace maybe after knowing that these four men aren't here anymore. Like it's like her own way of, she went through something so traumatic that this is a little small amount of peace for her.
Yeah, I agree. I think like
Also empowerment. She must feel empowered at this moment.
100%. Yeah. I mean, imagine coming down on your attackers with an axe, just like in a speedboat, and just like, oh man, it's
It's kind
so
of badass to do it in a speedboat.
yeah.
It's kind of awesome.
And that was Camille Keaton driving that boat, or piloting, whatever, but piloting that boat. Like she just learned the day of that
Oh,
shooting.
that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, and so one of the actors taught her, and the male actor was in the water with her, and he could have got injured because he was buzzing her. And there was a funny story in growing up with "I Spit on Your Grave," the documentary, where she said the day of she was like eating lunch, and the guy, I think is Andy's in the water at that point. The So who would that be? Andy is Gunter Kleeman. She's eating lunch, and she comes up to him and like he grabs her sandwich, and he's like, shouldn't you be practicing with the boat, because he's going to be in the water with her, like doing that, he could be like in danger. And like they got into a little tiff or whatever, but afterwards she's like, I understood because
She
his
could
life
have
was on the
literally
line.
killed him.
Yeah, exactly. So but yeah, she did all that, which was great, and everybody did all their own stunts because they didn't have enough money for any of that. So all right, so then we're gonna rate it here in a second, but overall, what did you think of "I Spit on Your Grave" from 1978?
I hated this movie.
Okay.
I just, I don't know. I feel like I might have liked it more if the SA scene wasn't so long. I just felt like it was very, like we were forced to watch a smut film for 31 minutes. And
Yeah.
then the revenge was far too short, not just for the character, but also the audience who, again, had to sit through 31 minutes of watching this poor woman be tortured. We didn't get that gratification either of having the revenge be worth it.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did not like this movie at all. Um, the only thing that I can give Eddie credit for is Bill told me that it's the first movie where a woman gets her own revenge for any type of assault. Um, so, giving it credit for that is the only thing I can do. In general, I just did not like this movie at all.
Okay. And that's fair. I think there's a lot to dislike of this movie. There's about 32 minutes of it to not like. I understand like art for art's sake, and I feel like maybe he was trying to do something to kind of show the depravity of sexual assault
But I also
and
kind of
victims
think
and all that.
there are other movies, like Revenge, for instance. We just watched Revenge last night. You see the uncomfortableness leading up to her essay in that movie, and you see the guy put her against the window. You don't see anything after that. You don't see any of the assault. You hear some of it, and you hear enough of it to know that what's happening to her is not good, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
And the revenge is, I mean, the revenge is amazing in that movie, but um we don't suffer through. And that scene, even though we don't see anything, is only it's less than 5 minutes. It's got to be less than three. And
Yeah.
even in L, it starts out with her essay scene, and you only see, I don't know, a couple seconds, and it's gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from the movie. I just felt like it was so excessive. Like there's too much, and then there's like just unbearably excessive. And that's what I feel like I Spit on Your Grave was. Even the remake was way better than this one.
Oh, I haven't seen the remake. I had no desire to watch I Spit on Your Grave again.
I
And
wanted to
then like I
watch the
didn't
remake because
okay.
I heard good things about it. And I will tell you, I mean, I'm not recommending that you watch it. But the scenes are almost as long, the essay scenes, but they're broken up in different ways, and it doesn't feel as terrible as this does. And I think part of that is because the revenge is way longer. The revenge, I think, is two-thirds of the movie. And the revenge is, it's just amazing. It's so much better. She's not using her body to get revenge. She's just getting the revenge, and it's
I
justifying.
I wonder if I could just tune in for the revenge part of it since I understand I
You already
know the
know it.
first part
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you, the revenge is so much better than this movie. I
Okay.
think you would love it. Yeah.
I might check that out then. So yeah, so I think he missed the mark on what he was going for. And so yeah, it definitely hurt the movie for me. So with that, let's go into rating. So we do rate the movie out of 5 upside down crosses. So what would you give I Spit on Your Grave?
Is
Uh,
five the best?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. 5 is the best, 1 is the worst. Yeah.
Can I give half of one?
Yeah, you could give whatever you'd like. You give point one of a upside down cross if you like.
I'm gonna say half, just because of the fact that it's the first rape revenge movie where a woman gets her own revenge. Outside of that, I didn't care for anything in this movie.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I also didn't like it. I think well, I hated aspects of this movie a lot. There's some stuff that had some redeeming value just when it comes to like the industry part of it, like the cinematography, that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And I see what it could have been if they had just kind of reeled themselves back a little bit. So
I feel like if a producer had looked at this movie at all, they could have cut a large chunk of that out and still had the same movie, only better.
it was 100% self-financed. They had some producers, but it was largely their money, and no studio had any involvement in this, what you could tell.
I can understand why.
Sometimes studio involvement kind of, most of the time, studio involvement kind of messes with movies. But in this one, I think a studio involvement would have really helped it.
Hmm.
But anyway, so to say all that to say that for me, I'm going to give it 2 upside down crosses uh, for me because there was some stuff I liked in it, but the majority of it was stuff that I did not like. I agree with you that at the very least, we should have gotten the same amount of um, revenge as we got a sexual assault.
Hmm.
But to go further, we should have gotten more, right?
Hmm.
More of it. So, and I think that really, really, really would have helped it. So yeah, for me, it's 2 upside down crosses, which is maybe the lowest I've given to a movie on here. So yeah, but I am not about censorship and I'm not about gatekeeping. If you want to see the movie, if you know, I would not necessarily recommend it, but you should make up your own mind for it. As I stated, some people said that it does help them. So there's always that. So with that, we do 2 things I forgot. One, I forgot to ask you earlier, how did this particular movie pass you by? Since knowing that you're into rape revenge subgenre, is this one of those ones that you hadn't heard of, or you had heard of it, you just because of its um everything around it, you're just kind of staying away from it?
I had heard of it, um, but I also had heard that it was hard to watch. Um, and before I really started, I don't want to say getting into or enjoying because that sounds wrong. Before I started watching rape revenge movies, I watched the remake of Last House on the Left, and
Okay.
I had a very hard time getting through that movie. I don't think I've ever seen the entirety of the ending because I couldn't make it through the whole movie.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of was told or had heard that I Spit on Your Grave was very similar to Last House on the Left, and I was like, well, I think it's one I will avoid. But then, I
Yeah.
kept seeing it here and there, and then when you sent me the list, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do this one.
Oh, okay. And then um what I do ask is for a movie in a similar vein to this. It could be another rape revenge movie. It could be another movie from the late 70s you like. It could be anything. Or maybe another movie you think would be like a good double bill for this, which probably wouldn't because you don't want to see this movie again. So, but just anything. So is there a particular movie that you think you would recommend?
Um, well, as far as the rape revenge subgenre, I would say either L, if you can handle subtitles, because the movie is amazing, or Revenge. And as you had mentioned earlier, A Promising Young Woman is also a very good one. So I would say out of all of them, I would highly recommend Revenge.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a lot. That's a good one. And I feel like, well, maybe there was a time in the mid 2000s when like I Spit on Your Grave, like the remake happened where they weren't maybe approaching SA in the best light.
Hmm.
But nowadays, I think in the late 2010s or whatever decade, whatever the hell it called, I feel like it's a little bit better. It's like Revenge definitely is handled really well.
Hmm. Well, and the essay in the remake is it is as long or almost as long, but the first, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of it is not it's it's not an essay. It's more of like they're mentally messing with her. So yes, the time is the same, but it's not a continuous 31 minutes of what we saw in this one, where it's a lot of essay one right after the other. In the remake, it's not like that. It's very they mentally mess with her for a good bit of time before anything happens, and that scene is much shorter. Like the actual essay part of it, I think is like 5 minutes, maybe seven.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to recommend two. Um, one that's more current, we talked about it already, was A Promising Young Woman.
Mhm.
It was handled really well there, and it's just a really well done, well acted movie. One that was from this time period that I think handled it better was Miss 45 from 1981.
I
That's
have
by
not heard of that.
that's from Abel Ferrara. Abel Ferrara went on to he was like a huge like New York director. He did King of New York. He did Bad Lieutenants. So yeah, so he did Miss 45 in 1981, and it's about this woman who is she's S8, and she takes revenge on her assailants or her attackers, but the way she does it, I feel, is just handled better, and it's just I think it's a lot cooler too. Like um, she has a gun, and she at one point dresses up like a nun, and she looks fucking amazing. She looks cool.
It's
So yeah,
awesome.
Miss 45, done in the same time frame, but I think handled subject matter a bit better. So those are my recommendations. So um, I think Xena and I are going to continue our conversation in the Sunday school sessions, which is a Patreon exclusive show. But before that, I did want to offer you, Xena, a chance to tell everybody your socials and how they can follow you and support you.
Okay, so I am X_Rush 0628. And then our film company is Original Cinematic, both on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Xena, this has been I hesitate to say fun. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
subject matter was not fun, but having a conversation with you was great. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me.
Of course, I'd love to have you back on. In the meantime, everybody, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you later.
Live spooky, die spooky.